Hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Amanda Montoya. I'm an associate professor of quantitative psychology at UCLA, and I'm really excited today to do the first ever webinar on memory. This is a tool that I've been developing since 2015, so 10 years now. And we've developed a pretty big user base, which has been really exciting. And just a couple weeks ago, the most recent version came out. So I wanted to kind of have an opportunity to meet with you all and answer questions that you have, especially about like the new functionality or even old things. So I have a little bit of a presentation prepared, but then I also want to have lots of time for Q&A that folks have. We're not in a formal Zoom webinar. Our university license doesn't let me do that. But I have the Q&A set up so that you can submit questions via Q&A, and that'll make it easier for me because it's just me over here managing the Zoom. So if you have questions, feel free to post those in the Q&A. What are we going to do today? I'm going to give just kind of a brief history of memory and the models and where it came from. I'll talk a little bit about what's new in version 3. So this is the most recent release that has come out. And I'll walk through kind of the model template system and the specific moderated mediation models that are all new. I'll talk a little bit about how to install memory. Essentially, nothing has changed. So if you've used memory before, it all works the same. And then I'm trying a new system for reporting bugs and issues. So for the most part, if people have had problems, they've just emailed me. But I'm going to talk about a new system using GitHub that should help kind of organize those requests a little bit better. I'll talk about some of the stuff we have in the pipeline for upcoming releases of memory, and then I want to have a lot of time for Q&A. So memory is, and you may be for the first time learning that I call it memory instead of like MEMORE or MEMORE. I've heard, I think every iteration of that ever. That's totally fine. I always say I don't care how people say it as long as they use it. Memory is a tool. It stands for Mediation and Moderation in Repeated Measures Designs. So the goal ultimately when we started this was to develop kind of a process equivalent tool that is specifically for these 2-instance repeated measures designs, which I'll talk about a little bit more. As of right now, it's available for SPSS and SAS. I'll talk about this a little bit in the kind of what's coming, but the plan for the future is to develop an R package as well. So if you are an R user, it will come. And then for SPSS, we have both a syntax and dialog box version. It's used for models with continuous mediators and outcome variables. I'll talk about that also in future extensions. And essentially, the idea is it uses these different score models to look at the impact of a repeated measures factor for an outcome. So part of it is that memory is really attached to a very specific design. This design is what I call the 2-instance repeated measures design. I think design and statistical tests should be removed from each other, but probably the most like easy way to understand it is it's like the paired t-test design. If you would test a total effect using a paired t-test, then memory is the right tool for looking at questions of mediation and moderation. So the idea here is that the kind of causal variable of interest is what differs between two repeated measurements. And then X varies between those repeated measurements, so that's our causal variable of interest. The mediators are measured in each of those 2 instances. The outcomes are measured in each of those 2 instances. And so far, moderators have always been between subjects. So for example, you might run a study where you have participants read two scenarios and they differ in kind of a systematic way. Maybe one scenario is designed to elicit fear and the other is designed to elicit enjoyment. And then you want to look at reactions to maybe products that people can buy, right? So these kinds of designs are really popular. We can also use memory for pre-test, post-test design. So cases where everyone goes through the same intervention, right? They're measured on some mediator outcome, and then they all go through the same intervention, and then are measured on the mediator and outcome afterwards. You can also introduce between, I don't know why this is auto advancing. I don't like that. Between subjects designs with moderators, but the focal variable of interest is always that repeated measures factor. So that is kind of the way that the tool is designed. A little about kind of the history of memory. So the first version came out in 2017. Believe it or not, this was my first year project in grad school. And now it's the rest of my life. So the first version came out in 2017 with this paper with my graduate advisor, Andrew Hayes. And the first version just had mediation. So it was a little bit weird to call this tool memory, but we knew that the moderation was coming, so we just committed. The second version came out in 2019, and that added in the moderation functionality. And it's probably pretty obvious that then you want moderated mediation. I know many of you have been waiting like a long, long time for this, so I appreciate your patience. It's been kind of hard to like find time to do all of this stuff, but it's something I'm really passionate about, and I keep trying to figure out how to allocate my time differently so that this is easier. One of the things I'm trying to do is incorporate more of my trainees in this process, so I have graduate students and that kind of thing, and I think if I can find some that are really excited about programming, then that would be great. And then obviously, so today we're talking about version 3 of memory, and this incorporates conditional process analysis or moderated mediation. And the newest version allows for moderation of any of the paths in a mediation model by a single between subjects moderator. So there's a lot of asterisks around this. Obviously, there's not every single moderation model or moderated mediation model that we could have. But it's a pretty big step in terms of functionality. So what's new specifically? Well, the big thing is there are now models 4 through 18, and these are our moderated mediation models, and these have been incorporated so that you can have either a simple, meaning one mediator, or parallel mediation model. As many of you may know, if you also use process, moderation and serial mediation is a bit complex, so we haven't totally tackled that yet. But especially, I'm really interested in kind of hearing what kinds of things people want so that we're prioritizing the things that users want. So this is kind of the big, really big development. The other small development is that we've added smarter mean centering. So for those of you who've used memory for moderation before, you know that maybe mean centering certain moderators can be very helpful for understanding interpretation. So before you kind of had this option of like center or don't center all of your moderators, that's all you can do. But now there's kind of this new option where you can either center all of your moderators or center all of your non-dichotomous moderators. So only center the continuous moderators. This is something I tend to do in my own practice, so I thought it would be nice to just add in. So now that we have more than 3 models, there's a lot of model templates. If you're familiar with process, you're probably familiar with this kind of system, but if you're not familiar with process, then it might be kind of new. So the basic idea with the template system is that In the memory download, there is a PDF that describes each of the models, and you, in specifying the model in memory, select a model number that goes with the model that you want to fit. So the shortcut here is model 1 is mediation, whether simple, parallel, or serial. And then models 2 and 3 are moderation, and now models 4 through 18 are moderated mediation models. Each model comes with both a conceptual and a statistical diagram. And part of this is one of the things that our lab has been doing is actually looking at publications that use memory. And we've noticed that sometimes it's a little maybe unclear to users what figures to put in a paper. So we provide these both as kind of an explanation of what the model is doing, but also a potential way that you could display the model in a publication. And then the models with mediation components have these dashed lines, and I'll show you some examples. If you're familiar with the kind of history of mediation within subjects designs, historically, we have kind of always included implicitly through the models an interaction between the focal predictor X and the mediator. This isn't actually common practice in between subjects designs, except for those folks who are using more causal mediation models. It's kind of naturally part of the causal mediation model. So just as a note, those dashed lines are things that you can take out of the model if you don't want them there using the XMint option. So just as an example, this is a conceptual diagram for model 1. This is a parallel mediation model. You can have as many mediators as you want, up to 5 pairs. And these dashed lines represent that X and M interaction conceptually. So those can be taken out by setting the XMint option to 0. So if you want a more kind of traditional model, you can set that option to 0. Statistically, this model looks quite different, right? There's no X variable, and that's because memory is asking for data in wide form. And then it's creating all these different scores and sum scores and doing all these regressions where the average term, it is actually representing that XM interaction. And if this is a totally new thing, it's described pretty well in the 2017 paper, as well as Judd Kenny and McClellan, 2001. But also if people have questions about this, I'm happy to answer them. So as we expand out into moderated mediation, we now have these like pretty complex models. This is model 4. This model allows for every path in the mediation to be moderated. It just says like, go ham. And you'll notice here that there are a lot of moderated paths. This could potentially reduce statistical power if you're fitting a really broad model, right? So I'll show you, but we have models for kind of every combination of moderated paths, which is really nice. And similarly here, if you wanted to remove the moderated X to M interactions, this is actually a 3-way interaction between X, M, and W. You can remove that using the XMint option. These statistical diagrams, they get really crazy when you have a lot of paths. If you don't have a lot of mediators, they'll get a little bit simpler. But again, just demonstrating that there are kind of multiple ways to represent these models. If people want formal statistical diagrams, these are here. If you want more of the conceptual diagram, these are here. You can use whichever one you like. So obviously model 4 is very general. It allows every path in the mediation to be moderated. So we also have more restricted models, like here model 15, which only allows the path from X to M to be moderated. This is kind of equivalent to model 7 from process. So we have every combination available, and every model comes with a conceptual and statistical diagram so that you can understand all the bits and pieces that are going on. We also have models like model 16, which only allows the path from M to Y to be moderated. So this would be equivalent to model 14 in process, if you're familiar with the process modeling system. And again, statistical diagrams for each. So obviously there's a lot more models now, and you may be wondering, like, which one do I choose? Ultimately, a lot of the choice of a model comes down to theoretical basis. So from a statistics standpoint, I can't necessarily tell you choose this one and not that one. But we've tried to make some tools available to help you. One is obviously the model template document that's part of the MEMORE download. I've also made a PDF that compares memory to process. So if you're used to thinking in process models, there is a PDF that describes essentially if I want process model 7, what number is that in memory? There are some models that are available in process that are not available in memory. There are some models that are available in memory that are not available in process. So it's not a perfect one-to-one matching. But that PDF can help, especially if you're a regular process user, that might be helpful. The most recent paper to come out, this paper, I think they listed it as 2024, but it's going to change to 2025 once it's out in print. So I'm just sticking with 2025. There's 3 worked examples, all with, yes, all of these documents are on the GitHub. There's 3 worked examples in the paper. 1 is in the paper and 2 are in the appendix. So you may have to look at the appendix. All of the data for all 3 of those examples is openly available. So you could actually work through those examples on your own, which is great. I made a set of video tutorials for the beta testers while they were beta testing version 3. And I've just released those so that other people can have access to them now that MEMORE version 3 is available. And then I wanted to show you something really cool that our lab is developing, which is a database of papers that use MEMORE. So let me see if I can get the screen share to play ball with this. Maybe. Here we go. Let's try a different one. Open. They're supposed to be cool. Let me switch my share. So this is a database that we've been developing that has identified papers that use MEMORE and allows you to look for examples of papers maybe in your specific field or with certain specifications. So you can filter by research area, you can filter by model number. So right now we only have mediation and moderation models in, but one of the things that we're planning on doing this year, especially as people start to use version 3 of MEMORE, is adding in some of these moderated mediation models. You can search by journal. So if you're planning on submitting to a specific journal, you could see if somebody has published a paper previously using MEMORE. And then we have a lot of other filters. There are sheets for essentially every paper. And then if you're specifically interested in moderation, there's a sheet that just has the moderation, and then you can filter by some specific elements of moderation. And then there's also one for mediation. And if you have published a paper using MEMORE, or it doesn't even have to be a paper, if it was like your honors thesis or dissertation or something, if it's available online, we would love to have it in this database. So there is this button here that says submit article, and it goes to a Google form, and you can submit information about your article. And we would love to add it to the database to help other people find examples as well. So we're always trying to think about new ways to help people use these tools in cool ways. But this is something we're pretty excited about, and we'll be adding moderated mediation models as they come out. I want to talk a little bit about the functionality for moderated mediation. So basically, all of the previous options, or almost all of the previous options that were available for moderation or mediation, are available for moderated mediation. So if you were used to using Monte Carlo confidence intervals, or you really like the W mod val option, all of that works with the moderated mediation models. So for example, you can use the Johnson-Neyman procedure. You can probe at quantiles instead of at the mean plus and minus 1 standard deviation. You can provide specific values of the moderator. The plotting option is still available. Monte Carlo, Sobel tests if you really need them. Change the level of the confidence intervals, number of samples for bootstraps, and then saving your bootstraps and Monte Carlo estimates. And then of course the Xmint option. And centering. So pretty much everything is available for the moderated mediation that was available for mediation or moderation. There's a couple exceptions to this. So one is the serial option does not work with moderated mediation yet. I'm trying to come up with a sneaky way that you could just turn on serial for any of the models, so that we don't have to have special model numbers for serial moderation or serial moderated mediation. Haven't quite figured that out yet. So right now the serial option only works if you are doing just a mediation model. The contrast option, which is typically available if you have multiple mediators, is not available if you have moderated mediation. For the moderated mediation models, you can only have one moderator. So I know for models 2 and 3, you can have up to 5 moderators, but for now in models 4 through 18, you can only have one. We're trying to decide kind of whether to follow process and have different model numbers depending on the number of moderators, or if we can come up with maybe a better way of doing this. So just to talk a little bit about installing memory, if you've used memory before, it's actually just identical to how you have used it before. You should always be downloading the latest version at the GitHub. So I've tried to kind of move away from hosting this independently, just so that there's a single source for everyone. So I've switched to kind of using GitHub. There's 3 different ways to use memory. So there's the syntax version in SPSS, the dialog box version in SPSS, and the syntax version in SAS. The documentation has specific instructions for how to install each of these. But basically for the syntax in SPSS or SAS, you're going to open the memory file, run it in its entirety, and then that kind of teaches SPSS or SAS what to do when you use a memory command. The dialog box, you can either click the .spd file and then request that it installs, or through, depending on your version of SPSS, where this is in your menu system can differ. But essentially, you're going to go to install dialog box and then select the file. One thing to note with the dialog box is that you may need to have administrative access on your computer. So if you're using a university computer and your account doesn't have administrative access, you might need to use a syntax version or ask an administrator to kind of help you get this installed. The nice thing with the dialog box is you only have to do it once, so you don't have to bother your university admin every time you try to install it. That would be a little bit of a headache. So ultimately, installation has not changed from any of the previous versions. The code is longer, obviously, now, but pretty much the same. Something that is new, though, is how I'm asking everyone to report bugs and issues. So GitHub actually has a lot of really nice built-in functionality for submitting issues, bugs, feature requests, that kind of thing. So I'm going to be trying to use that a lot more. if folks email me, I might ask you to submit this as an issue on GitHub, just to kind of keep all of the information very central. Part of this is I now have kind of a small QA team that is working on memory, so it's helpful for them to be able to access all of the bugs and issues. So on GitHub, there is a little area where you can submit an issue. I also have open discussion for memory on there. So discussion would be more like, oh, could I use memory for this thing, or asking about a specific question. The really nice thing about this is it allows others to benefit from seeing how an issue has been resolved. So I get a lot of the same questions via email over and over again. And so it would be great for people to be able to access kind of previous questions. You can see if your question has already been answered. Obviously, don't post anything on there that is like private information. So for example, data sets that are identified, that kind of thing, we don't want to violate your IRBs or anything like that. This will also streamline feature requests and bug reports for us. So we've always kind of, I kind of keep like a running tally of who asks for what things. But now there's actually a direct way for you to essentially kind of upvote a feature request. So if you look on there and somebody has requested something, and you're like, yeah, I want that too, then bump it up so that we know that it's a high priority. And you can do this on the GitHub page, or you can use these specific links. I'm gonna post these slides on my webpage just after this. So this is just the issue section and the discussion section of the memory page. And then just a couple kind of, I don't know, teasers, I guess. What are we planning on doing next? Well, I'm always really interested in hearing from you what you want next. Part of making tools is making tools that are useful. So I want to make sure that I'm prioritizing issues that actually come up for you. So if you have ideas about model extensions or functionality, always feel free to submit those. And then some things that we have that we're already working on is we are going to be making an R version of memory, so an R package. This is going to function a little bit different than the way that memory functions, just because R is more of an object-oriented language. So it's going to be a little bit more like you kind of run memory, you have an object, and then you might use the plot function to get plots, or you might use the probe function to probe the interactions, that kind of thing. And then we're working on models with dichotomous outcomes. This has come from a lot of our colleagues in decision sciences, where instead of necessarily having continuous outcomes, you maybe have a choice between two options at the end of a study. So that is actually, all the models are developed. We just need to work on the actual implementation in memory. We're also working on models that have more than 2 levels of X. This is one of the most common questions we get is what if I have 3 conditions or 4 conditions? So we're working on that as well. And then obviously, I think a common extension that Process has that we don't is moderated mediation with multiple moderators. So that will definitely be high on our priority list. But of course, if the extension that you wanted to see on this list isn't here, let us know. And we really do try to prioritize things that our users are really looking for. So always feel free to use GitHub to request a feature. I've actually already put in a couple feature requests of things that I wanted to put in version 3 and didn't quite get there. Especially there are certain kind of usability things that Process has that I want to put in, like an activation screen. So those are kind of already on the list, but any other things that you want, let us know. And then some additional resources. Many of you may not know about this because it kind of got hidden in a paper, but there is actually an R script for doing power analysis for within subjects mediation. This is something I get email questions about a lot. So if you are interested in that, that is available. The scripts are on my GitHub actually, so you don't even have to like go to this preprint. You just end up back at the GitHub. So we've developed this database of mediation moderation papers. And oh, I have a typo. And then we're going to start adding moderated mediation soon. There are actually a few papers that have already come out that have used moderated mediation from our beta testers, and then a couple papers that I worked on as a co-author. There is a similar database for between subjects designs that my former graduate student, Jessica Fossum, made. So if you're a process user and you want to like find examples of people using some of the very rare models in process, she has tried to hunt down at least one example of each model in process, which is really hefty thing, and continues to actually add to this every week, essentially. So if you're interested in that as well. And then, of course, the process macro is really great for between subjects designs. And for folks who have more complex within subjects designs, I would point you to the MEMORE macro that Nick Rockwood has developed. So a lot of the time people ask me like, oh, what if I have, repeated measurements within each condition? Then you start to get into the multi-level modeling framework. And that's where MEMORE comes in. It does mediation and moderated mediation. It's a really great tool. So if you're kind of expanding your designs in that dimension, I would definitely recommend getting familiar with MEMORE. Just a few more things, places to kind of learn about memory. Obviously, read the documentation. I am trying to keep my website up to date with kind of all of the resources that I can provide. And then I have mostly fallen off the X train and jumped on the Blue Sky bandwagon. So you can find me mostly on Blue Sky. I did post about this on X just because I know that some people are still on there. But I've mostly moved over to Blue Sky. And then, of course, please feel free to submit issues or discussion on GitHub. Or if you're just like, I don't know how to do the GitHub thing, you can totally email me. That's also fine. And then I just there's a lot of papers that are related to memory are already out. We have one preprint that's been a preprint for a long time. So there's one paper specifically that's not kind of out yet, but the preprints on SciArchive, where we're looking at a specific kind of moderated mediation model where you have kind of a pre-post treatment control design and how you would test moderated mediation in that design. So yeah, we have a lot of things, but also much more to come, hopefully. Yeah, so that's all I have prepared. Let me unshare my screen so I can see, and then yes, great. And then if you have questions, feel free to post in the Q&A. You should see like a little Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, maybe. Yeah, let me pull the link. Sorry, while I'm presenting, I'm very bad at posting links, but here's the link. Preprint. This is the new condition, pre-test, post-test. Cool. And I just want to say thank you guys for logging on to, I know this isn't, I don't know, this isn't something I've done before, but I kind of thought it might be a nice way to bring on, new folks who are using memory or people who've been using it for a while and are excited about some of the new functions. It's also nice to just know that you guys are out there. Sometimes sometimes we're just programming in the background. We don't know if anybody's going to use this, so it's great to see. And just as a reminder, if you publish papers, or even if you have a preprint up of a paper that uses memory, feel free to either just like email me and let me know, or you can submit through the database. Let me put up the link for the database actually, because that's a little bit harder to find currently. This is the memory database. And also with the database, if there's anything that you would want in terms of filters, we've tried to kind of guess what people would want to filter on to try to identify example papers. But if there are certain things that you would want, just let us know, because it's pretty easy to add these things in. Super. Yay, our version. I'm excited too. I've made an R package once for class, so this is it's gonna be a big undertaking. I do not promise it's coming like soon, because it's gonna take a little while, but I'm very excited about it. I just did like a workshop on making R packages, so that has got me very excited. Well, super. If there's not other questions, I don't want to take up all of your time. Oh, great question. So what do you suggest as a starter in using the tool? One thing that I would recommend is, for all of the papers that are out there, the data sets are available. So you can actually just start by doing the analyses that were in the paper. And that's a great way to kind of just, there's the data, there's the code, and just make sure that you understand how everything goes together. I think that that's a great way to just get started, is replicating the analyses in papers. Great. Yeah, as I was saying, I don't want to keep you guys longer. I know everyone's busy and they have their own lives, but I just want to say thanks for logging on. I'll stick around as long as there are some of you, but do not feel like you have to stick around if you don't have questions or you don't know. Yeah. So, Vanya, if there's a specific moderated serial mediation that you're interested in, feel free to maybe email me, because we do have some like custom made macros that we've made for like specific models. So if you're interested, there are also some tricks that you can do to potentially get it out of memory by like melding two models together. So feel free to reach out about that. Other question, will you offer any workshops for memory in 2025? I have done, so this year for the first time, I did a workshop through Statistical Horizons. They have not, I think I just did it last fall. Gosh, I should know when I did certain things. They have not scheduled the next one, but it would probably be through them. So let me see if I can pull my profile from them. They don't list any upcoming courses. Here we go. So, so that's just a link to my instructor page through Statistical Horizons. I'm teaching a workshop in April that uses process. So that's kind of the intro to mediation, moderation, and conditional process analysis. And then last fall, I did a workshop with them on memory. And I imagine if folks are interested, then we'll probably do it again next fall. Super. Well, thank you all so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I hope that you can use memory to do some cool science. And yeah, we're always excited to hear about the ways that people are using these tools. So please let us know as you're using them. Uh, it also helps us get funding for making more and new versions of memory. So yeah, thank you all so much. Close us out. Thank you so much.